Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And today we are discussing Book 1, A Court of Thorns and Roses, Chapter 7.
Chapter 7.
Okay, let's open up.
Dive in.
What have we got marked here?
All right, first thing I have is her noticing their plates made out of real gold. Our mismatched cutlery from back home flashed through my mind as I paused in the middle of the room. Such wealth, such staggering wealth, when we had nothing. There's Feyre noticing all the comparisons with her old world.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of this in this chapter. Just
She's getting used to life in her new special world.
Comparison.
Yes.
Do we need to tangent about comparison?
Comparison is a killer of joy.
It is.
It is. It really is.
It really is. Well, I think like our brains are gonna do. I don't think that a brain can't not notice.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is different from that. I think that it's supposed to do that, but the compare and despair. It's like when we compare and then we give it a meaning.
Yeah, or
hurts really
compare,
bad.
and then it's because it's like an envy, like the jealousy envy thing. Like one of them, you notice what the other person has and you want it, and the other one is you notice what they have, you want that, and you want them to not have it, which is probably a little what she has going on here, because she's like, these evil, wicked creatures, they don't deserve to have this. My family does. We're the good guys.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. Like, oh my goodness, can you guys not see that the rest of us are starving?
Yeah.
But paragraph 2, okay, so she's looking at what she's seeing in terms of comparison, and the way that I read this is the reason it bothers her is because she's filtering it through her negative story. So she calls back to a half wild beast. That's what Nesta called me. So she's like, her sister called her this, and now she's looking at this comparison. Compared to him, compared to this place, compared to the elegant, easy way they held their goblets, the way the golden-haired one had called me human, we were all half-wild beasts to the high fae. And I just think that's so significant. We were talking about this. We see this later in the chapter. We see this over and over. And we all do it, where we interpret what we are seeing through our narrative about ourselves. And I'm like, if she didn't already have this story about herself, I just wonder how she would have interpreted it.
Yeah, definitely. It's all her story. Favorite story.
So much of her story. But yeah, so she's looking at this abundant wealth, and immediately it's calling back to her these worst thoughts about herself.
Yeah.
Oh, Feyre.
Oh, Feyre. The next thing I have is where it's the first time there's even this awareness of him being a male and her being a female when he or when she doesn't answer him when he's talking to her, and then Lucian is like, told you so, your skills with females have definitely become rusty in recent decades. So the fact that he's even trying to have skills with a female, it's like, oh, okay, there's a dynamic going on here. They're not just beasts and a human, it's actually male.
Well, and this is where she finally learns his name, too.
Yes.
We've got...
Dun, dun, dun.
He is Tamlin. Oh, Tamlin.
And she now knows that he's at least decades old, because they've been slipping in recent decades. And here she is 19, and he looks not that much older than her, but obviously is quite a bit older than her.
Yeah. Yeah, and so she's super uncomfortable. Oh my goodness, this whole chapter, there's so many things where we were just talking about Lucian, and some people like him, but I'm like, I struggle with him in these first couple chapters.
First couple chapters, you're definitely not supposed to like this.
Yeah, he's like, don't look half as bad now. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just so terrible. Okay, but this next one, she's like, wolves ready to pounce. That's what they were, just like their friend. Or, yeah, is that what I'm saying? That's what they were, just like their friend, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was all too aware of my diction, of the very breath I took, as I said, I'd prefer not to wear that dress. And this moment stood out to me. And again, I don't know if you've experienced this. I'm not sure about everybody else. But just as a person who has dealt with so much social anxiety. And I know that feeling where it's you can't be yourself. It's Like how am I holding my hands? How am I holding
I don't
my
know what
legs?
to do with my face. I don't know what
What
to do with my
word
arms.
what word do I say? Like what's the exact word that I say? Where every single interaction and moment and way that I say a thing is like just that hyper awareness of how we're being and how we're showing up and how we're talking.
Yeah. And for her, she's trying to also hide the fact that she does want to run away and or kill these people. So that is why she didn't want to wear the dress. So she's even more on top of all this social anxiety that she has going on. She's also like, how do I answer this without being obvious about what? I mean, of course, they already know. Tamlin's on to her because killing us is easier.
I know. I think we actually brought that up in an earlier episode. We did because got our chapters mixed up. But it's a thing. I don't know, friend. Though, like you and I, this is it's interesting because we're being recorded right now, so we're probably not being like 100% ourselves totally. There's a little bit of awareness because there is a microphone, but it is fascinating. I'm like I feel more comfortable doing this, like talking with you, like being recorded, even though that's going to be out in the world, than I have just having like one-on-one conversations with certain people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right.
It's like, well, at least we know we're safe in each other's company. They could be judging us all, but I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. I don't know what they're saying. I just know you, and there's this random camera in the room.
There was one of my friends who's a coach. I think he was quoting somebody else. So this is like way down the chain and probably like off from however it was said initially. But the basic premise being, it takes no energy at all to be 100% yourself.
Yeah.
Like being exactly who you are 100% isn't draining. And I would think about, and I remember him saying that, and I just pondered that and pondered that and pondered that.
I'm going to be pondering that for a while now
right?
myself.
And I would notice, I'm like, okay, so then I would go and have a conversation or an interaction with a person. And sometimes I would leave feeling energized and sometimes I would leave feeling drained. And then times whenever I felt drained, I'm like, I didn't feel 100% comfortable to say exactly what I thought, exactly the way that I thought it, in full honesty. And so the whole time I'm talking, like I'm enjoying myself, but there is a part of me that's filtering what I say, right? And like making sure that like I don't say that, or like how do I say it? Like make sure I say it this way, and some of it's knowing that the person across from me has different religious beliefs or different political beliefs, but also it's not really about the differing beliefs, but about like not necessarily feeling fully safe to have a different opinion and that be received well. And I look back, I'm like, yeah, that's tiring.
It is. It's exhausting. But it reminds me, from book 2, I won't say anything about what it is, but there is a character who has to keep a damper on their power and their magic all the time. And that in itself is a little bit draining. And so that's just an interesting parallel in what we have to do. Like it is a little bit like keeping a damper on not in that same way, obviously, because it's not like, but it is unconsciously, there's this, well, if I let my full everything out, then that could hurt this relationship with this person, because there are a lot of people in life who it's not safe to have certain conversations with, where like say the wrong thing and suddenly your nice coffee with somebody is going to be an argument that your friendship may never recover from, and you might never see them again, which obviously, do we need people in our lives like that? That's a whole other conversation.
Is a whole other conversation. I actually had that conversation twice today during coaching, twice today during coaching. And it was all this, it was all of these like should and this and that and like relational drama. And when the relational stuff gets really complicated, I do a lot of times pull people back to, you are an adult.
Yeah.
And as an adult, you are allowed to hang out with who you want to hang out with. And you're allowed to not hang out with who you don't want to hang out with. And I'm like, the simplest and cleanest, and I really like that word clean, like the cleanest way to make decisions about who we hang out with and don't is based on what we actually want to do. But we're not taught to do that. It feels so much more complicated. No. Okay, by the way, though, back to what you just said. I really like this because we're just like getting ready to do groundbreaking work right here. So there is There is a truth in wisdom. Okay. And I talk to my clients about this all the time. I'm like, there's a difference between me not telling somebody my honest truth because I'm in fear, because I feel less than, because I can't handle them disagreeing with me, but something that makes me feel small or diminished. And then there is a space of just being wisdom, right? That like not everybody's a safe space, not everybody's a safe person for our truth. And there can just be wisdom in avoiding certain conversations. And it's not because I'm diminishing myself, it's not because I'm afraid of speaking my truth, but because I'm just like, I know that's not going to go well and I'd just rather not today. And then there can be wisdom. But I feel like you almost presented this other version of it. Can we look at being in conversations with people as from a place of being so incredibly empowered, right? Because it's almost like I felt like the two options that I've been able to see were one where I feel very small and disempowered, or one where it's just kind of like neutral and like wisdom. But like this place of like, we are people with such a deep well of power. And can we move to that place where we are incredibly empowered? And yeah, and maybe sometimes we choose to not let it shine completely brightly so we don't blind some people around us. I don't know. See, I will have to think on that one if there's something if there's something good in there. I'm like, but I do like the idea of reframing this in a way that comes from power and from love. But I don't know. I think the thing that I don't like about that though, as we're working this all out live, is one of the commitments that I made to myself though was I made a choice a while back of I will not diminish myself to make somebody else more comfortable. I don't know, and I kind of feel like that's what that is, though, right? Like if this is my light and I'm dampering it.
Yeah, but I also think it would require such a strong inner story, the opposite of Feyre's inner story. Like your inner story would have to be, you'd have to be very comfortable thinking of yourself that way all the time. Like I got the first tinge of goosebumps when you said the third option, because it was like, what if we really lived like that? What if we, and it was from this place of like, I'm maybe not going to say everything, like I don't need to profess everything that I believe in every conversation. So it's not like I'm holding that in. But if I actually had that internal narrative going of that, and that's really what we are. That is the power that we all have. We all have that magic in us.
Yeah.
But we don't think of ourselves that way. So it is, we do the neutral or the small option. But that other option, it's like, what special events am I saving that me for?
Right. And I think if you're thinking about the character that I'm thinking about from book 2 that we're not allowed to talk about because we don't want to give anything away, I think that the way that they phrase it is that they keep a damper on their power almost because it's just easier to blend in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. And almost like being the person whose power like shines super bright, it's just easier sometimes to blend in a little bit. And I'm like, and I feel like that's almost like what you were saying. It's like, just because like we understand like the deep depths of our power, again, doesn't necessarily mean that like every single platform is a space to like,
yes. Have I told you lately my beliefs about this and that?
I don't know. It's such an interesting conversation, but the truth of, you know, me going back and checking in with myself and like, if I'm not saying everything that I think, like, what is the real motivation behind that? And whenever I do anything because it's from fear, or if I do it from a place of I need to make myself smaller to make you more comfortable, there's just certain spaces where I'm like, no, I think I'd rather it be a dumpster fire than abandon myself.
Yeah.
And that's a hard choice.
Dumpster fires aren't a lot of fun. They don't smell very nice.
But there are times right now where I'm like, if, and it's not usually those two options. Usually there's a couple of options, but I just kind of made that deal with myself. I'm like, if these are my options,
dumpster fire it is.
I'm going with the dumpster fire. Like, I just abandoned myself for too many years and I'm just not willing to do it anymore. But it has been interesting showing up that way. It does create some
dumpster fires.
some dumpster.
That's what happens.
Oh, but it feels good to be in my own corner and have my own back, as much as possible.
That's obviously hugely important.
Anyway, so but I just so this idea of like being so hyper aware of every single thing, that she's saying because she's so uncomfortable. Girl, I just relate to that. And I think so many people do, where we just never feel. And I had this conversation too with someone else where I was trying to think through this. This was a while ago. I'm like, when is the last time that I felt permission to, like, at 100% level, say exactly what I think, exactly the way I think it? And at the time when I looked back, I was like, probably never. Like, it's really just degrees of dimming, right? I'm like, there are people who I feel safer, and there are a handful of people who I feel incredibly safe with. But at the time when I was having the conversation, like, having that realization of, like, I don't know if I've ever shown up completely honestly, 100% myself, completely vulnerable, and felt safe to do that. And that's not necessarily because the other people weren't safe. I just couldn't feel it within myself to the place of letting my guard fully down. That was a hard realization day.
Yeah.
I remember I was pretty sad that day when I realized that like I'd never really truly felt safe enough to be 100% myself with anyone. It was a turning point.
Yeah. I don't know how many adults. That would be an interesting poll if we could get 100% of adults to respond to this poll and find out, like, how. I wonder if that's a pretty common thing, because as adults, it is hard to find, really. Like, even within intimate relationships and everything, like, there's just always parts of you there. Like, there's this, you can see all of this. Oh my gosh, you can see all of this. All of this. I'm opening all of this up to you.
Except for this part. Yeah, I'd be curious. So if you guys are listening, I'm very curious for everyone else. Like, if you have people in your life who are like, it's 100%, completely me, every bit of it, or if there's any of you that relate to the idea of, like, it's actually more degrees of openness without being 100% there. Hopefully we get a lot of polls, because I'm super curious to hear that.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you have those safe
people. Okay. Fun stuff.
And your hair is clean. Yeah, really sexy pickup line on page 60.
You look better than before.
And your
hair is clean. Was that a compliment? Which, I mean, one, because she wasn't expecting it, and two, because it was a little backhanded.
Yeah. Because, she was filthy. So it is an improvement that her hair is clean.
And apparently she's been plucked like a chicken as well. So there's probably a lot less of it as well.
It's definitely not a turn on. But I will say that starting here, I have my first, like, oh, this is Tamlin's save the cat moment for me, because we already had Feyre. Okay, so I don't know if you guys all know about this, but in screenwriting, you always have this save the cat moment with the hero. They do something and you're like, this is a good person. I love them. Now I'm going to join this journey and care what happens to them and care about them getting what they want. Well, for Feyre, she literally has a kill the deer moment instead of a save the cat moment in chapter 1, and then a kill the wolf moment at the same time. So it's like we have a harder time with Feyre until we learn why that it's her whole family. We get hers much more gradually, but Tamlin's for me here is when he's like, do whatever you want. I don't keep slaves. Like, these aren't huge. It's not like, but still my beating heart. You don't keep slaves and I can do whatever I want. But still they're like this little chink. That's not beastly. It's a little chink in the armor of, like, okay, all right, well, he was not going to make her do anything slavish, which she was kind of assuming that he would. So that's nice.
Yeah, minimum baseline here.
Yeah.
So sad. But there were... Okay, so this page, though, like right after this, there's a point, and we see it happen here, and we see it again later in the chapter, where so she starts to let go a little bit of that fear. So there's a release of that tightness in her chest, where she's realizing she's not going to be a slave. He's told her that she's, whatever, I forget if she says it here later, but this idea that she's allowed to go around, she's allowed to do things. But what she asks here, she's like, what am I to do with my life? you know, and at first she's like, are you wanting me to work? Are you wanting to earn my keep? And Tamlin, don't you have any interests? No, Tamlin, this is what happens when you're in survival mode. You sacrifice your interests to get by, and then you reach a place where you don't have any. Have you never been a mother?
Don't you
Have you never
book Farah? Don't you do anything?
What's this thing? You know, and she later has a similar conversation with Alice. She asked her the same thing. What am I to do now? Like, what am I to do with the entirety of my mortal life? So she shrugged and suggested a walk in the gardens. Almost laughed. But this is something to be, okay, again, going deep here, where when we have been in survival mode,
God bless survival mode.
God bless survival mode. But there's a measure of it that initially it's almost like because we don't really have a choice because we literally are surviving, but then it becomes habit. It becomes familiar. And like we talked about, just like her, where like we start to lose connection with those things. And I think then when people get to that place where they realize they actually do have some free time, like things are a little better, there's that I don't know what to do with it.
I don't know what I want to do. I don't know.
Gosh, I think this was in my book, by the way, so you've probably already read this or I've told you this story, but I remember whenever I was starting to do personal development work, and it was kind of along the lines of, I don't remember, zone of genius stuff or just something along the lines of figuring out what you want to do. And it was like an exercise. It's like sit and be calm and like imagine that like you wake up and nobody needs anything and the world is fine and there's plenty of money. Like, what do you do with your day? Like, what do you want to do if nobody requires anything of you? And it wasn't like I couldn't sort through the options. I couldn't even form a thought because every single part of like every day, every moment had been obligation and need and have to and should, and most of it really legitimate, some of it made up in my mind. And I had such a breakdown cry. And I think it was one of those times where like I didn't cry a lot, not a huge crier, but I think my husband like found me crying and like I couldn't even make sense of why I was upset. It's like, because I don't know what I want and I can't figure out what I like, and I try to do this thing and I can't come up with anything. But I remember feeling like there must be something so horribly broken and wrong with me. I'm like, how is it possible for me to not even know what I like?
And yet that's so common.
Apparently it's very common.
Especially for moms, especially when you you come out of that whole thing, you're like, well, I'm not still into the stuff I was into before I had kids, because I was a kid before I had kids, and now I'm a grown up, and I'm like, what the heck?
What is this?
I don't know.
And like it has been good. And thank God for coaching groups, not just like one-on-one coaching, to really see how many other people were dealing with the same stuff, and to talk to so many people over the years. You know, like getting to coach hundreds of people and see like behind the scenes with so many people, and just realizing how, like, I know now it's truly normal, but I didn't. And and because like we don't talk about those things or share about those things. But like discovering what I like and what has still been a process. Like I used to think that I liked cooking or like baking. I don't.
I like eating things that I have baked because I know that they're safe and they have great ingredients in them, but that doesn't make me enjoy the baking.
Our whole family last night was talking about like we all would like more baked things in the house, but there's not a single,
damn it.
Like we would all like a cookie right now. I'm like, gosh, me too. And everybody kind of looks at me. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And everybody else is like, I don't want to do it. But I used to think that I wanted to do it because I liked the feeling of accomplishing a thing. And I thought that made me a good mom, and it felt good to serve people. But I confused it felt good to do something nice for my family with actually whether or not I liked the thing. And when I discovered that element to it, I'm like, well, now I really don't have a clue, because how do I separate out my enjoyment of, you know, and then people are like, you're so good at this. You're such a good baker. You make the best stuff. And I'm like, thank you. Right? Like ego. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you take all that away, no, I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue what I like just to like.
I'm glad you finally figured it out.
I'm still getting there.
Well, I know that you like talking to people and telling them what to do.
I like drinking coffee and having deep conversations.
And I know that she likes reading fantasy romance. Thank goodness, or we wouldn't be here right now.
Okay, so right now, fantasy romance, conversation, drinking coffee. This is my perfect life.
Woohoo!
This is my
We're
perfect
living the
life.
dream.
Perfect life. It really is. But yeah, poor Feyre. Again, like,
yes.
I think that's why I can just relate to these books so much, where she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, you and me both, girl.
Yeah, I know, I do. I mean, obviously, we know from the bits of what she's seeing and what she's. I don't know if we've gotten to that part yet, actually, but we know that she's an artist. We know that she painted at Rome and all of that. So we know that that's what she wanted to do. If she had it, like when they had that question in her own mind, it was, well, she knows she wanted to have enough money to pay for all the food and get some paint supplies, and she just wants to paint. But of course, she doesn't feel safe saying that to these high fae people who she feels completely insignificant around. And she's like, I like to paint. She doesn't feel safe to say that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so they now get into this conversation. So like, one, she's pulling back to this, like, so I'm supposed to stay in luxury while my family starves to death, right?
Yeah, that would also
but she gets
feel guilty. Sitting around painting when you think your family is still starving.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. She's like, my family is starving. She's like, you have to let me go. There's got to be some loophole. And Lucian's like, have you even apologized yet? Like, and that was such an interesting moment, like, where you realize, like, there are two sides to the story. And she hasn't been able to see that other side yet because she's still caught up in this. But they then go on to talk about this. How she killed him, how all of this looks. Really, really comfortable dinner conversation. But, and I love this line here, like, do you know what it's like to not know when your next meal will be?
Yeah, and that's such an important, because when you have been really poor or like actually hungry, actually pulling quarters out of your sofa to go down to Taco Tuesday night to get your kids a taco each. Like when you've been in that place and then you talk to somebody who's like, I know there are some people in this world who only make $50,000 a year and that's fine. And you're like, if that's as low as you think life gets for people, my friend, we need to talk about actual reality.
About what actually happens.
So I get where she's coming from there, for sure.
But what I like here that... Okay, so there's this another thing here where she fights, and Tamlin does let her know that her family's alive and well cared for. He's like, you think so little of fairies that you believe I'd take their only source of income and nourishment and not replace it. So she starts to understand that her that they are taken care of, that they are okay, that sort of deal. But I love this scene before because we just have, there's a lot going on of everybody seeing the conversation from different perspectives, but we see backbone. Like, the girl, she's willing to fight. Like, she's willing to fight, and she only has half the story. Like, it's not going well. But again, I continue to love that she's got fight in her.
Yeah. She definitely does.
And it pulls her through. Like, even when she's uncomfortable, and even when she's afraid, and even when it's not a comfortable situation, she's willing to fight. So
yeah. And then Tamlin does there's another Tamlin turns to look at Feyre and it says, he turned to me, ancient and brutal and unyielding, which is intense. It's really intense to have a person looking at you who's ancient and brutal and unyielding. But then just a few paragraphs later, when she says, you swear it, about the fact that he is taking care of her family and that they're well cared for and alive. When she says, you swear it, he says, on everything that I am and possess. And that was another that's a get save the cat moment for me with Tamlin too. Because I'm like, okay, that's a strong statement. He really is taking care of her family. I believe him. Now I'm starting to like him a little bit more at that point where I'm like, okay. Because she really genuinely thinks that her family is dying without her there. So
right.
That's nice.
Right.
He swears it.
And we're starting to get glimpses here of like, okay, maybe he's not this like big scary beast. So that's good.
Or not only this beast.
Not
Also,
only he is
definitely
he is
a big
literally a
scary
beast.
some of the times.
Oh man. And then we have this like awkward transition where they're starting to ask about Lucian's just being kind of a jerk here about whether, there's this like line of suitors out their door.
Oh, yes.
Which transitions into, their interesting questioning about who she's dating, which is really weird for her. So we get through all this like nice
And
awkwardness.
she's also like, why do you care? Aren't you like getting, I mean, you just said, because Lucian was just like, why don't we kill her? And now he's like asking about
her love
dating.
life.
She's like, what is, and you care whether I think humans are more attractive than high fae? You're just so arrogant.
What is this? Okay. End of this page though, end of 65. You're insignificant enough to not ruffle this estate.
I have that one flagged also. There's some more. More
And that
for
will
her inner story.
That will be a word that she comes back to time and time again because he said it. And this is, and it's interesting because what he's saying here, still not a great moment, still not being careful with words, still not, making this point. But she's kind of asking for an explanation of his generosity. And, he's like, I'm already killing too often. Like, and basically, as long as you don't start killing us, what he's saying is like, it's like the estate can handle another person here. Like as long as you're not killing anybody, like he's saying it doesn't harm anything for you to be here. Not great word choice, but like this wasn't meant to be hurtful. But everything is viewed through her story. Yeah. Right? So like she snags on just that one word and she'll repeat that one word. Like
and who knows what he even meant by that, or like whole other conversation we could have after we've all finished this series and not have to worry about spoilers about like why does he say that. And I like trying to elaborate the theory, but we can't
know exactly what he's saying, but I'm like it's one of those situations where like in context, it could just be like, you don't eat a ton of food. Like we have a lot of it.
Exactly.
You're going to eat a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt anything for you to live here because it's not that big of a deal. Again, still not a good word choice, but it is fascinating to see how her brain hooks onto that one word.
And he's just saying, I'm not going to kill you because you're insignificant. So it's actually like, it's nice to be insignificant because it means that he doesn't need to kill her.
Yeah. But she immediately goes to, she's embarrassed, her cheeks are red.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, insignificant. Yeah. And she goes all the way back to her time at the cottage and her paintings. And we can see how this is her deeper story and her experience of all of this. At which point she's like, I'm done. Thank you. Goodbye. I'm leaving the room because this is super
not
comfortable.
Quite feeling grateful at all. Thank you. And she leaves.
Yep. Oh goodness. Okay. So now she's, so she goes, she has a good night's sleep. So she locks herself in her room.
She had such a good night of sleep compared to sleeping with her two sisters at home in their tiny bed.
Yeah. But that was interesting too, though. So, Feyre and your story, because so she's thinking about her sisters and she's like,
my sisters are enjoying having the whole bed to themselves.
They must be super glad that I'm gone. Yeah. Right. Like that no part of her, she doesn't even imagine that they miss her. She just immediately assumes that like Nesta is just like glad for the space. And like in her mind, like the idea of like a fairy beast came and like snatched me out of our house in the middle of the night and they're probably happy.
But I don't know. I mean, do you think Nesta was upset? That I guess I don't know. Do you think Nesta was upset? Because I think Nesta probably had already gotten over it and probably was a little like, it's nice to have the bit of horse. Like, I don't know.
You're like, sounds
I
right
haven't
to me.
read enough of this. I don't know enough of Nesta yet. I'm only halfway through book three, so.
I do know what she thinks and I do know what she feels, and we all find out later. But the interesting thing is the assumption.
Yeah. It is definitely an assumption.
It's a little bit of a spoiler.
But I love that she's just lingering in bed and she's just lying there enjoying her.
I got this
buried my face in the pillow, pulling the blankets higher. It just sounds, those blankets and pillows sound so clean and fluffy and luxurious. I want to stay in bed too. It sounds so nice.
Oh, it is nice. I do that these days. You still got littler kids.
Yeah.
I've got my kids are at the age where Yeah. Now my oldest she's more of a morning person, but my youngest, like we have to like drag her out of bed. Nobody's up early. My dog sleeps in. Like I'm usually the first one up and going. And if not, yeah. Like, but I love this. Like laying in bed. And this is one of those things I think we were talking about this. One of the most luxurious things for me is like if I can wake up and the first thing that I do is just roll over and open whatever novel I'm reading. To lay in bed and read a novel in bed like before I get up for the day. I don't know why it feels so indulgent and luxurious, but it does.
It does.
Like so much.
I keep my A Court of Wings and Ruin right now. I mean, it's usually because I fall asleep, like falling asleep reading it, and then I put it there, and then I wake up in the morning like, oh, maybe I should read it.
Maybe I should read this.
Or finish that chapter. I'm just going to finish that chapter, and then of course that turns into 3.5 chapters, and I'm like, oh crap! Now everybody's awake, and that was all of my quiet time in the morning to myself.
Oh my goodness.
But I got to spend it in Sarah J. Maas character, so it's all good.
Her morning then gets interrupted when her trap goes off, and
what in the bottomless depths of the cauldron? I love that line so much. It's so something like I grew up in the South, and that's if we had words like the cauldron, I'm sure that would have been a swear for an expletive on my grandmother's lips all the time. What in the bottomless depths of the cauldron have you done in here, Amanda? Yes.
Oh man. So, and she feels bad. She feels bad instantly, and they have this conversation where she's reassured again that she's safe. She's still not getting the information that she wants, but that she's okay. So then we do have an interesting passage here, which I found, because in all of these first chapters we're learning about our character, right? Like we're still story set up. We're still learning about her. And we've got these couple of chapters in here about her thoughts about her appearance.
Yeah.
And that always stands out to me, right?
It wasn't pleasing.
Right.
That's at the beginning of one of the paragraphs.
But we get this idea that like she doesn't, it's not great right now because she's basically starving. Yeah. And everything is, that's what she says. Like she was a far cry from ugly. And she knows that, and she knows what that looks like. But it was interesting to realize, like when she looks at her appearance, it's not that she actually she seems to have a pretty decent, or she at least doesn't think herself ugly. You know, she's like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's in the middle. It's fine. Yeah. Like, it's not bad. Yeah, right now I'm starving to death. So that's a thing. Yeah. Because everything isn't going very well right now.
And then she goes back into the comparison. Though I suppose that for Tamlin, for high fae used to ethereal, flawless beauty, it had been a struggle to find a compliment. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, if we were going to compare ourselves to cover models, airbrushed cover models, which, of course, at some point in our life, I'm sure we all have gone through that fun part of adolescence.
I love that there is more of a trend away from that. Like, not for everyone, but I know, like, I have really appreciated, like, the ongoing trend within, like, the body image movement, that a lot of influencers, a lot of people who post photos, like when they then go through and they're like, hey, let me show you the same photo but with different lighting. Love that. Let me show you what it looks like if I pull this down. Let me show you what happens if I sit down.
Yeah, it's just if I'm sitting straight instead of with my...
Yeah. And like showing the different, and they're like, same body, different angles, same body, different lighting, same whatever. And even though there's a part of me that knows it, I find it so beneficial to see it. Like, it's like I almost need it repeated over and over and over. And like every time I see somebody do that, I'm so, so thankful. And the first time I ever saw that was, oh my gosh, I just lost her name. She was one of the like cover girl models, and she did Tyra Banks. And she did like on the cover of a magazine, it was like her face before makeup and like after makeup. She's like, this is what I actually look like when I woke up. It was one of the most helpful things for my self-esteem ever. I'm like, oh, she looks tired.
And then just put on makeup. She didn't get a nap. She didn't get 9 hours of sleep. How does she go from tired to vibrant? Oh, it was makeup.
Oh, all humans look tired when they like roll over. Oh, she's got bags under her eyes. Okay. Like, and it was so...
That is incredible. Yeah.
Anyway, so I love that. I love that. There's a couple of accounts that I follow. What's the one? Do you follow Sunday Morning View?
No.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Sunday Morning View.
It's an account that really celebrates women's bodies as art, like all different shapes, all different sizes, all different colors, all different everything. And yeah, their content often gets flagged because it's, and it's a lot like there's a lot of naked images and just like really seeing the female body in its form, but it's so good because it's normalizing stretch marks, it's normalizing
scars,
dimples, it's normalizing color variation, and it's such a good account. Anyways, but I feel like I have to like constantly make sure that that's what I'm letting in.
Yeah, that's smart.
To my images of all these things. But Farah, she seems to be okay. She's like she's taking kind of this like grounded, down to earth.
Yeah, it's decently healthy.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. All right. So then we've got another callback here to some of her. She's walking down the hall. We see some paintings, right? So we've got some more of that, and we see she's looking at it. She's really, really into this portrait, and she's like, I could have stared at it for hours. This could have just occupied my entire day. But I have to go do this other thing. Yeah, which was a conversation I had today. Did we even talk about that in this episode already? But the idea of part of how we identify our zone of genius is it's those things where we lose time.
Oh yeah, no, we haven't talked about that. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So when she said this, I'm like, yeah, because like Farah, this is your zone of genius because you can do it. You can do it for those things that we can sit down and do, and we look up and it's been 3 or 4 hours and we don't feel like any time has passed at all.
So good.
Those are the things. And that was part of how, we did talk in this conversation about like, what in the world do we want to do? Right? Yeah. Like, do we actually know what we like? This was part of how I figured this out for myself. Because in my mind, I could get confused about just enjoying praise or enjoying serving or doing something just because for me, I'm also have an achiever personality. So I just like ticking things off of a list. It doesn't matter what they are. You make me a to-do list with 20 things, and if I tick them off, I feel pleasure just because I ticked them off. It doesn't matter what the activities are. It's a thing. And it made all of this really confusing. So part of the way that I started figuring out what I actually like to do was, where do I lose time? What are the things, and not stuff like I zoned out to Instagram, not like I was so tired.
Everyone's zone of genius must be TikTok.
Or like when I'm like, I'm so tired and I should go to bed and I've been staring at my email inbox for 30 minutes and didn't do anything. Not like that, not zoned out, but things where, oh my goodness, that was an hour and it felt like 20 minutes. It felt like 10 minutes where time was passing differently. This was part of how I figured out what I enjoyed and like what was for me. Yeah. And you're right. When somebody's like, when I learned about this, like losing time, they're like, where do you lose time? I'm like, coffee dates.
We were going to meet for 25 minutes. It turned into 3.5 hours.
Oh my gosh. You should, at some point it'd be fun to have my husband on here. And my husband and kids, they make so much fun of me for like how long it takes me to say goodbye to someone.
Oh, they do? I thought that was just me. I just always assume that I'm the person who takes the longest to say goodbye to everybody.
No.
Well, and then my daughter definitely rivals me now. Like yesterday we were done recording. I'm like, all right, we're going to go. And then I think it was 40 minutes later that we were actually in the car driving.
Yeah. No,
I've passed it on to the next generation. Long goodbyes.
I feel like all we're doing is just saying like one more thing. It's just like, just like one more story. But then it's like, then they tell one more, then I tell one more. And my husband's like, you have moved 3 feet and it's been 40 minutes. What are you doing? I'm like, saying goodbye. Like, what are you doing? Is this not normal? Is this not normal? Anyway, so if any of you out there are like, oh my goodness, I really connect with Farah. I don't know what I like. Go try some stuff. Go try some stuff.
Where you lose some time.
And if you got kids, we always joke, if anybody watches My Little Ponies, we always joke about the cutie mark crusaders. Either you get that reference or you don't. But they didn't know what their cutie marks were. They just tried a lot of things until they found it. But I'm like, go try a bunch of things and see where you lose time. Where does it feel like it's sped up? It's a good starting point, at least, if you need a starting point. Okay.
Some of us do.
All right. Gosh, this is such a long chapter. Okay, so now we learn that there's a sickness in the land. Mm-hmm. So we get that first understanding of that. Yeah. And and we have Tamlin requests to go for. Is this wait? Did he request to go for a walk with her, or didn't
Well,
she
he
just walk
asked her. He
past
said,
him?
"Do you want a tour?" He offers to take her on
Do you
a
want to
tour.
go on a tour? And she's like, no, thank you.
Do you have a problem with me? Like that, the whole conversation.
Oh. Anyway, so we have this thing where she, at the end, we'll see you at dinner. She's got some more awareness of what's happening on the land. And right now where the relationship is, I strode off between the hedges, not caring where I was going, only that he stayed far behind.
Yeah.
Nice, warm relationship between the two.
Yes. And that was chapter 7.
End chapter 7.
End of chapter 7. Thanks so much for watching today, guys. If you haven't already, make sure to hop on over to ACOTA, that's ACOTAA.circle.so, where you can not only watch these podcasts as we go through the books chapter by chapter, but you can also get a little more involved with them. You can leave your own comments or all kinds of posts in the chats there, or you can dive in a little deeper and find out about all the deeper experiences that we have available to you. So we'll see you over there. Bye.
Bye.